welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping straight into something pretty core to the product world, the product management lifecycle framework.
Yeah, that's right.
Think of it as the blueprint or the structure that guides a product from the very first idea all the way to, when it's eventually retired. We've got some great material here from a PDF chapter, actually, that really digs into why this framework is important, what its pieces are, and crucially, how it gets used in practice.
And our mission today really is to give you a solid, usable grasp of this whole concept. We want to cut through the noise.
Exactly. Avoid the information overload. Give you the essence.
Because if you've ever sort of wondered how products actually get made and managed, this framework is, well, it's key. It gives you that method behind the madness.
Okay, so let's kick off with why. Why have a standard framework at all? Our source material really hammers this home from the start.
It's all about having a shared language, isn't it?
Precisely. Whether you're deep in product yourself or working with marketing, engineering, sales, you need that common way to talk about
Yes. Without it, things get messy, like really inefficient, fast.
You end up talking past each other.
Totally. Imagine like building a house, but the architect, the builder, the electrician all have different names for wall or wire. It'd be chaos.
Right. So this framework solves that fundamental communication problem.
And the benefit, well, it's pretty clear. Things get done more efficiently and communication is just clearer, smoother.
It sounds simple, but in complex projects, that shared understanding is honestly a lifesaver.
Definitely. And that brings us neatly to this idea of a common lexicon that the source talks about.
Ah, yes, this shared vocabulary.
Exactly. A framework establishes this common set of terms for, well, everything. Information, activities, practices, the deliverables, all of it.
And it's not just words, right? It also sets out some core principles for how you manage products effectively through that whole life cycle.
Yeah, it's deeper than just definitions. Our reading points out that this lexicon makes product management itself more relevant, more effective, because it defines the boundaries. It clarifies how product teams interact with everyone else.
That makes sense. It sort of defines the playing field and the rules of engagement.
And that definition, that clarity, it empowers the whole organization, really. When engineering, marketing, sales, everyone understands what product management does, its value, things just flow better.
So summarizing those benefits of the common lexicon, it provides that universal, standard way to manage products, cradle to grave.
Right. And it helps teams make clear commitments they can actually stand behind at each stage.
Which in turn boosts communication clarity, fewer crossed wires.
Beautifully. And clearer communication means, well, smoother execution. Things actually get done more effectively in each phase.
Plus, the source mentioned it lays a foundation for common tools.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're all speaking the same language, using a similar framework, it's way easier to find or build tools that actually support that consistent process,
Makes total sense. Okay, so we get why it's important, this shared language idea. Let's get into the framework itself. What does it actually look like?
Well, the source describes it as representing the passage of time, the whole journey of a product, from cradle to grave, as they put it.
The full life cycle.
Exactly. It typically flows from, say, development or maybe acquiring a product, then commercializing it, manufacturing, operations.
And operations covers that whole market phase.
Yeah.
Right? Introduction, growth, maturity.
Maturity, decline, yeah. And then eventually market withdrawal, taking it off the market.
So it's like mapping out the natural life story of a product. And within that big picture, the framework breaks it down into standard and predictable phases.
Right, often labeled with simple verbs like conceive, plan, develop, launch, things that describe the main activity in that phase. Our text doesn't list the specific verbs, but that's the idea.
That predictability is interesting because obviously every product is different, but having a general map of the stages and the kind of work involved seems super useful.
It really is. It helps you anticipate what's coming next, what resources you'll need, what challenges might pop up.
And critically, at the end of each of these phases, there's what the source calls a decision point, often shown as a triangle in diagrams.
Yeah, these aren't just progress updates. They're like major business decision gates.
The source says they're for optimization, scrutinizing investment, improving quality, basically making sure you're still on the right track.
Think of them as strategic checkpoints. You pause, you assess, is this product still viable? Does the market still want it? Should we keep pouring money into it?
Right. And the possible outcomes are really clear-cut. Continue, that's a go.
Or cancel a no-go.
Redirect, meaning rework it.
Or defer, put it on hold.
It's a very structured way to manage risk and decide where the resources go. And importantly, these are different from, say, a technical review within a phase.
Good distinction. Those decision points are about the big picture strategy, market fit, financials. Technical reviews are more about, does the code work? Does the feature meet spec?
So what gets looked at in these big decision points? The source lists a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive.
Like, does it still align with the business strategy? Is the market actually there? Is it big enough?
Do we have real customer data backing up the unique value proposition compared to competitors?
Is it technically feasible? Can we actually build this thing?
Have we identified the big risks? Do we have solutions or mitigations?
Is the value proposition solid? Do we have a go-to-market plan ready?
Is the potential return worth the risk we're taking?
Do we have the right people, the experienced team members
Yeah.
available?
How rigorous was the testing? Is the quality there?
Are there any absolute showstoppers? If so, what's the plan B?
Have we communicated all the risks? Does everyone agree on the mitigation plans?
And ultimately, is all the key players genuinely bought into the execution plan?
Wow, yeah. They really cover all the bases. It shows how interconnected everything is. Strategy, market, tech, finance, people.
Exactly. You need input from everywhere to answer those questions properly. It's about making sure you're not moving forward based on wishful thinking.
Very true. Being really deliberate and informed at each stage.
So you put all that together, the overall stages, the phases within them, and these crucial decision points, and that's your product management lifecycle framework, the roadmap.
Nicely put. The roadmap for the product's journey.
Okay, so we have the map. Now, who's doing the driving? Let's talk roles.
Right. And the source immediately highlights how cross-functional product management is. It's inherent to the role.
The product manager might have the overall responsibility, the vision.
But they absolutely cannot do it alone. They rely heavily on collaboration with, pretty much everyone else. Engineering, marketing, sales, support, legal.
Like an orchestra conductor, maybe.
Yeah.
Keeping everyone playing together.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And because every company sets things up a bit differently, different team structures, different reporting lines.
Things can get confusing about who does what.
Exactly. Which is where the source introduces the RACI matrix.
RACI. Responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. A classic.
Yep. A really practical tool for getting super clear on those roles and responsibilities as the product moves through its life cycle.
And the goal is better flow, right? Helping the product manager deliver value by making it clear who needs to do what, who needs input, and who just needs to know.
Precisely. So let's quickly break down those letters. R, responsible, that's the person or team actually doing the work, getting their hands dirty.
Usually just one R per specific task, the source notes.
Right. Then A, accountable. This is the person who is ultimately answerable for making sure the work gets done correctly and completely. The buck stops with them.
And crucially, only one A. They're the final sign-off.
That distinction is key. Responsible does it, accountable owns it.
Got it. Then C, consulted. These are the folks you need to talk to, get opinions from. Subject matter experts, usually.
Yeah, and it's two-way communication. You're actively seeking their input, their feedback. It's not just telling them something.
It ensures you're tapping into the right expertise before finalizing something.
Makes sense. And finally, I conformed. These people just need to be kept in the loop.
One-way street. You tell them what's happening, progress updates, decisions made, but you're not necessarily asking for their input on that specific task.
Exactly. So the source mentions a table 8.1, that apparently shows this in action for a tech company, like for defining user requirements.
Who might be who?
Well, maybe the product manager is accountable, A, the UX team is responsible, our engineering is consultancy, and maybe sales is informed, IG, just as an example.
Okay, yeah, I can see how laying it out like that would clear up a lot of potential confusion. Everyone knows their role for each key activity.
Absolutely. The source really stresses that this role clarity is vital, not just for the PM, but for the whole cross-functional team and even leadership. Everyone needs to understand who's doing what and who they depend on.
Okay, so we have the lifecycle map, the phases, the decision gates, and now clear roles thanks to RACI. That seems to set us up nicely for actually mapping the production process.
It does. Once you understand the stages and who's involved, you can start visualizing the actual flow of work. The source says the PM needs to grasp the whole thing end to end.
Not just their own little piece.
Right. They need to see how information flows, who hands off to whom, what the dependencies are across all the different people and processes involved.
And understanding that bigger picture, those cross-functional connections, that's what leads to better execution.
That's the idea. More efficiency, more effectiveness. There's another figure mentioned, figure 8.4, that apparently shows this whole process. Visually roles, engagement levels, outputs per phase.
Seeing it mapped out must be really helpful. It clarifies those handoffs.
Definitely. A good process map spots the bottlenecks, smooths out the transitions, and just makes the whole thing run better.
Okay, so building on the life cycle and roles, the conversation then shifts to the specific product management processes.
Yeah, the concrete steps needed for success. These involve knowledge, skills, tools, teamwork, all that stuff. And crucially, they have defined inputs and outputs.
So what does a PM need to do with these processes?
Well, the source lists a few key actions. First, understand the whole life cycle, the stages, the phases we've been talking about.
Makes sense. Got to know the map.
Second, choose the right process groups for what the product needs to achieve. It's not one size fits all.
Ah, so you tailor the approach.
Exactly. Adapt and localize standard processes for your own organization's needs and culture.
Okay.
And, critically, recognize that you rely on stakeholders from other areas. You can't do it in a vacuum.
That cross-functional point again. It keeps coming up.
Because it's fundamental. This body of knowledge, the source says, documents what's needed to manage a product through all those phases. Conceive, plan, develop, qualify, launch, deliver, retire.
The whole shebang.
The whole shebang. And these processes are seen as pretty universally applicable. Goods, services, different industries. Following them generally increases your chances of success.
But universally applicable doesn't mean you use every single one every single time, right?
Correct. Localization is expected. The PM needs to be smart, look at each process, its inputs, its outputs, and decide if and how it applies to their specific product right now.
Requires good judgment.
Absolutely. And these processes aren't isolated islands. They're interconnected, tied to the life cycle stages.
And since product management is a leadership role,
Success hinges on collaboration, getting everyone working together towards that common goal. Again, cross-functional alignment is key.
you need the product processes to mesh with what engineering, marketing, etc. are doing.
Yeah. The source even warns that things can fall apart if those contributing functions don't deliver their part of the process effectively.
So the PM also needs to work closely with project managers too, it seems.
Definitely. They often partner closely to make sure everything stays on track and obligations are met.
So the material then sets up a deeper dive into the actual process groups for each phase, but reminds us that in the real world, these things often overlap.
Which is true, isn't it? It's rarely a perfectly linear step-by-step thing in practice. It's more fluid, more iterative.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've covered quite a bit.
We have.
We've seen why having a standard product management lifecycle framework is, well, pretty crucial for clear communication and just getting things done efficiently.
Right. That shared language, that common lexicon.
We looked at the structure, the overall stages, the phases within them, and those really important decision points or gates.
Those go-no-go moments.
Exactly. And we talked about clarifying roles using RCI,
Mm-hmm.
which seems super helpful for managing those cross-functional teams.
Mm-hmm. Avoiding the who does what confusion.
And then we touched on mapping the overall production process and the specific product management processes that drive everything forward.
And for you, listening in, getting your head around this framework is actually a really efficient way to understand the product world.
Yeah, it's like a mental model you can use, whether you're just curious about how that gadget you love got made, or if you're actually involved in building products yourself.
It gives you that underlying structure, that logic behind bringing products to market and managing them over their whole life.
So here's something to chew on, a final thought. Pick a product you use all the time, anything.
Yeah.
Try to imagine its journey through this kind of life cycle framework. What might have been the key phases? What big decisions do you think were made at those critical points, those gates we talked about?
Ooh, that's a great exercise, applying the framework to something real.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
cool way to see how this structure plays out in the products all around us.